on a critical incident, if you call me at 3 o'clock in the morning, my very first question out of my mouth is, are you okay?
Yeah.
You just probably had the worst day of your life, and I want to make sure you're okay. Are you injured? Second thing I ask is, are you still recording? Third thing I ask them with Tmpa is, you have your choice of attorney, and I ask you, do you have a certain attorney you want me to send out there? And, well, the thing that sets us apart from everybody else is every single one of our attorneys are not just good, but I would say the best.
Welcome back, Blue Grit watchers, listeners, viewers. I'm your host, Tyler Owen. We got some guest hosts in today. The boys are back in town. Jon Wilkerson, our Legislative Liaison, and Tony Rike, North Texas Field Representative for Tmpa. What's going on, guys?
Not a whole lot here, man. Just winding down, or actually getting geared up. I'm trying to figure out if I want to wind down for the holidays while I'm getting geared up for the session. But,
yeah.
You know, it's kind of a roller coaster ride right now.
Well, yeah, you're about to be busy.
Yeah.
Yeah. We always try to take advantage of visiting, hanging out, having moments with Jon Wilkerson during the off season of session, because during session that you rarely hear from him unless there's some kind of catastrophic event. And when he calls with his hair on fire, it's not like you can punt that to the back of the burner. It's like we got to fix it right then. So I'm sure you're fixing to be really, really, really busy.
Quickly moving environment down there.
Yeah.
You know, I will say this before we even start. You know, he talks about, I hear some officers say my job's not political, you know, that type of stuff. You hear that quite a bit. I won't stay out of politics, but what these guys do at the legislature is, it really is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I've seen, you know, JW gets there at 6 a.m. at the Capitol, and a lot of times doesn't leave until 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, if he leaves at all. I mean, these guys really work their tail ends off.
And for those that don't know, anybody with, well, I shouldn't say that. I was fixing to go to a different topic, but anybody that lives in the Austin area that wants a little bit more quality of life as far as not the urban environment, they live on the outskirts of Austin, right? So J-Dub lives on the outskirts of Austin. And
if you want to call it that.
Well, yeah, but
I'm an hour north of Austin.
But you're an hour, right? Yeah. But during session.
No, during session, yeah, I got to stay at my cousin's house here.
Yeah, and so it goes back to the commitment and the dedication of our mission here at Tmpa. So he literally is in town for a whole week away from his friends and family to do the job, right? To do the job for our members.
So we joke about it in the division. We tell everybody that our spouses are 140-day widows.
Yeah.
Because for about 140 days, they don't hardly see us. We'll come in on the weekends and, you know, mow the grass whenever we can, but we're typically busy dissecting bills are going to be heard the next week. So, it's pretty busy time.
Speaking of the session, was it last session of the workers' comp bill? Or was it last session before?
Yeah, so it was last session. So we've worked session before. We got some language filed. If you recall, that was a session when the COVID presumption bill was filed and the quarantine leave was filed. So we were working heavily on those, and then also working on some of the workers' comp on the background.
Yeah, with Representative Patterson's office.
Yes. Yep. Patterson's done a stellar job for us down there. You know, like with everybody down there, there's going to be issues that he takes up because that's important to him and his district. And we don't have a dang thing to do with any of, or not say any, but a lot of what he works on, right? Like, take great example, the book bill he had about what books are allowed in schools and so forth, right? That's not anything Tmpa is going to get involved in. For one, it's political suicide to do that.
I mean, it could if it was like an anti-law enforcement book or something. Then we would certainly jump in there, but not for education.
Right, and then you know, like the school voucher stuff and all that kind of stuff. Right, we have to be real strategic on where we spend our political capital, and but getting back to Patterson, you know, I mean, there's things that Patterson does that, you know, I sit back and I just look and I scratch my head, but I can say that about all of them down there.
Yeah.
You know, but he's been nothing but one when it comes to taking care of injured first responders. I'd say he's the tip of the spear down there on a lot of our bills.
Well, and he was going to come in today. Tony was going to be coming in town, and so we were like, you know what, the hell with it. Tony's already here. He's made the travel down south. So let's just go ahead and talk about kind of the update of what's going on. For those that don't know, Tony Rike, he's got I want you to just re-intro yourself about your law enforcement.
Well, you know, I was on episode 20. And,
yes.
He's got it memorized.
One of the best ones, yeah.
Yeah, it was a good one.
Yeah.
For those that don't know me, my name's Tony Rike, and I'm the Dallas or North Texas field rep for Tmpa. I have all the Metroplex and go out to West Texas quite a bit. From a small town, Farmersville, Texas. Spent my career at Collin County, which is a booming county currently. Allen PD in Frisco is where I retired from. So the whole area has changed a lot. And, people ask me where things are up there now, and it changes weekly.
Yeah.
So
you really don't know. I mean, honestly, because is Frisco still, or is it far? One of those towns in Collin County was voted the #1 growing town in Texas.
actually, I think it's Salina.
Yeah,
Salina.
that's what I was
Okay.
thinking.
Wait, that's in Collin County, though, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, it is. So shout out to Jeremiah Phillips and the guys at Salina PD in the they do a great job with their police association. Very involved. We had an officer who got killed in Richardson, David Sherrard, several years ago, and small town Salina the next day cut a pretty significant check to his widow. So
And that goes back to they have a huge fundraiser every year. One of them, they've got several, but one of the biggest ones they have is their poker tournament.
Yep.
Which
They
has
do
been
it
very successful.
Yeah, they do a great job. We're just kind of bouncing around a little bit, but talking about local associations and stuff in our area, I'm blessed to have some good ones with Plano, McKinney, Salina, Frisco, just some very strong Collin County associations, and we have some good state reps up there as well that support law enforcement.
Yeah. We'll talk about, some people kind of have different lenses. We had Leighton Guarnere on a couple weeks ago to talk about the problems that were going on in Texas City. What do you enjoy most about being the North Texas field representative for Tmpa, and talk about some of the dynamics that you've experienced up there?
Well, I think anytime you're dealing with North Texas, what you have is exponential growth.
Yeah.
And so you have a lot of departments that are experiencing the growth, and they're shorthanded, they can't hire people. And then a lot of times what you see, nothing against these officers that are listening, but sometimes you get officers that don't have very much experience that get promoted. And then sometimes that leads to supervisory issues. Mm-hmm. So, those are some of the issues that we deal with sometimes in departments. And, really, the way you combat that is through, you have to have training. I mean, that's the way you combat that, is hopefully you have good leaders. And I tell people all the time, I've never, when I started working at the sheriff's office, I was making $997 a month, right? So who would have ever thought that, we would be in an era where a police officer is making, what they're making these days, with the money. And, it's just a lot of growth. And, the thing I enjoy most is just really going out and just helping each individual member, whether it be an association or just some officer that needs help with something. Yeah. That's really, I think, why we all do the job, is because we want to go help the good guys.
So even though that Tony's in North Texas, and prior to J-Dub being a legislative liaison, we were all field reps. I was a part-time field rep in East Texas. You were here in the Central Texas area. So we've all got these zones, right? And when problems crank off, you were like, Killeen was one of your big ones.
Yep.
They're in Bell County area also. But we all take care of our zones. But one day a week, one day every 2 weeks, the field reps are on legal, and then every so often it kind of changes for weekend. They're on call. So if you're involved in a critical incident, you call the 1-800 number. The field rep filters the phone call just to ensure that, can an attorney be assigned? They check your membership status, to make sure that we can assign the attorney. And then at that point, the field reps, historically, if it merits, the reasoning that an attorney should be assigned, then we'll go ahead and assign it for an attorney in that region. And so back to State Representative Patterson was going to come on today. That his schedule, he's a busy man. It kind of fell through. And so when I was talking to, back to the old raging Cajun Leighton Guarnere, he wasn't complaining about a critical incident, but it just kind of brought up maybe some educational value that we as TMPA can kind of talk to our members and the listeners out there just about, what do you do when you're involved in a critical incident, kind of what those protocols look like. Because I'll give you a great example. Let's just say Tony was involved in a critical incident and his body cam's still going, right? And so he's making the phone call to get legal advice from his attorney, and the body cam is still rolling. Well, that could be all, submitted into court. And so I think it'd be a good opportunity for us to kind of talk about, hey, these are the things that you need to be aware of. We're going to try to tap in Leighton here in a minute to talk about his experiences too. So for those that don't talk Cajun, we will try to submit some kind of Cajun dictionary in the description.
Yeah, we'll translate.
Leighton,
maybe put some subtitles.
If
it's possible.
Great idea, J-Dub. So man, I think it'd be a good time for you to go first. Talk about critical incidents. Is that you've been on the phone with people who have just been involved in a shooting. What are the steps you as a field rep are kind of processing in your mind at 3 o'clock in the morning of like A, B, C? What's the checklist for Tony Rike?
Well, so, and I think most of us probably do this very similar, but if you call and you're in a critical incident, first of all, we do get this quite a bit too, where people don't call.
Yeah.
Right. If you're listening to this and you're a member of TMPA and you have any question or you have anything, it doesn't matter. Call us. I think all of us would rather have that call on the front end of it than the call that I literally had 2 weeks ago where they just left because the ranger got through interviewing them. Yeah. Right? Oh, I didn't think to call y'all. Always call us on the front side. But if it's a critical incident, we take calls, not just critical incidents. It could be anything, from a policy violation to a question on FMLA, it doesn't matter. But on a critical incident, if you call me at 3 o'clock in the morning, my very first question out of my mouth is, are you okay?
Yeah.
Because that's, ultimately, you're going through a horrible experience, right? You just probably had the worst day of your life. And I want to make sure you're okay. Are you injured? Do we have any officers injured? Because that's my main concern, right? The good guys. So once you get through that, are you okay? The second thing I kind of ask them is, do we know, where you are? What's going on? Are you a member? Are you okay? Second thing I ask is, are you still recording? Do you have any kind of recording device on? There was some confusion. Were you in the session when the body cam?
Oh yeah.
Deal came up?
Yeah, we had to fight hard on that one.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure JW will chime in on that a little bit, but once that scene is secured, you can turn your body cam off. And so I was asking for the recording. Third thing I ask them with Tmpa is, you have your choice of attorney, and I ask you, do you have a certain attorney you want me to send out there? And 99% of the time, people are like, I don't care, just get me somebody good. Well, the thing that sets us apart from everybody else is every single one of our attorneys are not just good, but I would say the best.
Yep.
So,
they have to be. They're private practice attorneys.
Yeah, true. So, and that's kind of the steps we take. Are you injured? Are you okay? Where are you? And do you have a certain attorney you want? And then I tell them they're on the way.
Let's talk about let's give the definition of what a critical incident is, right? Because great example is I was in East Texas for a long time, and the realization is that I probably comfortably I would pull my weapon at least, if not once a night, once every two, especially working nights, right? There's things out there that you just don't see. The gut feeling aspect. It's a full moon. You know how people act crazy, and I'm not suggesting that I get out of my car and I pull my gun out every single time that I get up for a traffic stop. But there's certain indicators that we as law enforcement see that's like, man, something's not right here. So I may unholster my weapon. In East Texas, a use of force technically shouldn't be a use of force form or documentation of that. It's not necessary. It wasn't required by my department. I didn't do it to cover my own ass. But different regions are different because of the political environment, right?
Well, and I wouldn't say just a political environment. One thing I would add to that is we're starting to see a lot of departments moving towards that. And that is because of a lot of departments are going to best practices. Mm-hmm. And that is part of the best practices is having those review policies in place. So I think the more agencies that we see that go to best practices, whether it's through its CALEA or TPCA, or if the Sheriff's Association, if they build their own, I think we're going to see that to become an industry standard across the state.
Well, I'll say this too. I mean, one of the biggest, I won't say shocks, but one of the biggest things I noticed when I went to work for Tmpa is, Texas is a big state. The way the Metroplex does things is completely different than the way they do things in East Texas, which is completely different than West Texas,
yep.
which is completely different than South Texas or Houston metro area. I mean, it's such a geographically different state on how law enforcement and police work is actually accomplished.
Yeah, and it's not just because you live in different regions they do it the right way versus they do it the wrong way. It's the culture, right? It's the culture of the area that defines. For a prime example, I think every time that an Austin police officer pulls out a taser, they're required to, whether they paint somebody or not, and for those non-law enforcement listeners out there, painting means that you're painting them with the laser. You're taking the taser device and painting them with the laser device that's on the taser itself. And so that's considered a use of force. And so I believe not only is it Austin Police Department's policy, but it's also the requirement of the DA's office because it's technically a use of force. It's a use of force from the standpoint is that it's visual force. It's showing you that if you don't comply with A, we're going to result to you ride the lightning, right?
Well, it just goes back to, where the force continuum that was, such a big thing, and just by your presence. I mean, that's force.
Yeah. So the other day Leighton was talking about, this, he had a situation, and he can probably dive into it, about officers not really being clear about kind of when to call in, when not to call in. Last session or the session before that, we've now got the, failure to intervene
right.
law, which puts some complexities into kind of our legal calls. And so I think we've actually got Leighton on. Leighton, you there?
I'm here.
Hey, man, what's going on? The Raging
not
Cajun.
much.
The Raging Cajun has joined us via telephone. And so, yeah, I've got Tony Rike and JW here with us. And so you had a situation the other day that we were going to kind of highlight on the podcast about legal calls and what's the definition of a critical incident and kind of what your experience was. So tell us about that.
That's a lot to gather. Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, just I guess we Tony was just talking about different regions have different definitions of what technically a critical incident is. I mean, obviously we all can agree that an officer involved shooting, 100%. I think we can all agree to that. That is a critical incident, right? But then you have situations where it's a witness to an officer involved shooting, a witness to now we have been assigning attorneys to crashes on duty,
right,
and so forth. But talk about the importance of knowing when to call in, just as you talked about the other day.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for sure. I mean, if you discharge your firearm at somebody, whether you hit them or not, that's a critical incident, and they need to call in. The other day, recently, several times, we would have an officer involved shooting, and all of a sudden the board lights up with 7-8 calls. And it's just, it doesn't happen everywhere.
You are showing your age with the board lights up for those 25-year-olds back in the gap, telephone calls, but our emails would light up. Sorry, Leighton, I had to throw it out there too.
So hopefully we can get the message and information out to guys that if they have a critical incident, slow everything down. It seems like guys are getting in such a hurry. Slow it down. Let's get somebody on scene that can take command of the people that were involved in the incident. You know what I mean? And try to get everybody's name, contact number, stuff like that. So we have one phone call coming into us, because sometimes we get inundated from phone calls from the same incident, and we're discussing the incident with the original caller, but we're also having to answer, the next 5-6 calls that are coming in within, a minute or two of each other. So trying to get all that together to where everybody's on the same page. And then those names and phone numbers will go to the responding attorney, as well as, any other staff that's responding out to the scene.
Well, that's something else I was going to say too, Leighton, is, when you go out there, it's such it's chaos.
Yeah.
If you have it truly is chaos. And, all of us in this room, we've been to numerous, officer involved shootings. I was going to say that earlier, talking about the 4 steps. If it's anywhere near where I can get there in a reasonable amount of time, and I think all the field reps are this way, we're going to go, whether or not an officer is injured or not. I had an officer injured in Princeton a couple of weeks ago, and myself and Cody Webb, board member from McKinney PD, we actually beat him to the hospital. So, we're going to go check on you. But it is chaos.
Yeah. Reiterate a little bit on what Leighton was saying. And I really want to kind of go a little bit further into what Leighton was saying. So basically when a member's involved in a critical incident and they call, the answering service after hours, they're going to ask, is this an emergency? And if the member says, yes, it's an emergency, then what they do is that they call the on-call field rep. Mm-hmm. And so now if you've got 5 people that are calling in and Leighton's on the phone with the first caller, now his phone is beeping and you see it's the call service and you can pretty much deduce, okay, there's going to be somebody else involved and they're calling in. Well, if Leighton doesn't answer, then the protocol is, to make sure our members are taken care of, the protocol is they're going to call the next person, which I believe is probably still John Sriga. And if John doesn't answer, then they're going to go down the list until they find one of us field reps that they get on the phone with. So to prevent that from happening, a lot of times, and Leighton, I'm sure you can back me up, and Tony, a lot of times we may have to tell the person that we're on the phone with, hey, can you hold on a second? I think one of your partners is calling in.
Right.
Switch over real quick. So, just to reiterate what Leighton was saying, if somebody that wasn't involved can kind of just say, hey, how many of y'all are Tmpa? And, make that call for them and give all the names at one point and notify them, hey, I'm calling your legal for you. That would be pretty beneficial.
That's something I've actually started asking if it's an incident, hey, is anybody else involved, from that original caller? And then when I hang them up, I'm like, I know y'all can't talk, but just let them know that you've already contacted us.
Yeah.
So it just helps that process a little bit when we're trying to get attorneys out there and pass the information on to the attorney.
And one more thing on that, it's important, and Tony can back me up on this. I was at Tony's farm last weekend, and while I was there, had a member. We'll take direct calls.
Yeah.
Had a member call me. Yeah, man, I was involved in a shooting a couple days ago, and Tony heard me jump him out about it.
Yeah, Leighton had the same thing too. A couple days ago. Well, Leighton, I know that you've got an appointment with the Olympic tryouts that you're going to go through for the shot put next couple of years. You said your tryouts was at 10:45, so I know you're kind of limited on time. Is there anything else you kind of want to cover on that? We're going to kind of probably expand on that conversation here.
No, I think the JW and Tony's hitting all the key things about critical incidents, and I think we're in good hands with them talking about it.
Hey, real quick, is there any update on Texas City? I've gotten some texts and some phone calls about Texas City, and really how appreciative people were. The number one, Rachel came on here and was completely open about it and transparent about what was going on there. But is there any update on Texas City?
Not too much that I can talk about.
Yeah.
There's some things in the works right now, but yeah, she's doing a really good job down there, and she's getting positive feedback.
Good.
I would challenge the listeners of this channel, watch that episode. I know I texted you two over the weekend. I was watching it while I was trimming trees. Don't listen to that episode while running a chainsaw. I was laughing so hard I almost got my foot off. So, yeah.
Beth berries.
Yeah.
Beth berries. Anyway. All right, Leighton. Well, hey, take care. Stay safe.
Hey, appreciate you bringing me on and letting me be a guest speaker over the phone. This is awesome.
Okay. Bye.
Yeah, you never know what Leighton's going to say. That she went pretty good with him.
Yeah, it was.
It's going to be a team effort putting those subtitles in there, though.
I mean, he even sounded halfway American.
Yeah, he did. I'm Texan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was good.
But I do want to kind of pick up on what Leighton said. Is that it's not that you need to ensure that others have called too. Just don't assume that somebody's called because then the member's going to be in a situation just like the guy called you and said, "Hey, but 4 or 5 days ago, I was in a shooting and talked to a ranger and kind of probably need to get involved in the process." No, make sure that somebody's called, and then get one point of contact and then have them call.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different factors to think about on that. And this particular member, his thought process was, well, man, I've been involved in so many critical incidents. I knew not to talk to the ranger.
Right.
Well, that's fine. You may have gone through several critical incidents, but there could be some factors outside that you don't know about, right? A great example, when I was a field rep and I was covering one of the shootings that happened in Killeen, they called in a different ranger than they normally called in on that because one of the shooters was the normal ranger's nephews, one of the officers. So now you may be used to, okay, I know how they do things here, but they may call in somebody that's totally new, that's now going to come in, and maybe they handle things differently. Yeah. So it's really important to call that 800 number. And I want to give one more caveat, and I'm going to call this guy out. Guy I know, Eddie Rodriguez, years back, got involved in a critical incident. He told me I can talk about it. So I'm driving to Ty, Texas. If you don't know where that is, right outside of Abilene. And I pull up. I'm a little bit early for my meeting. I'm scrolling through Facebook, and the guy sent me a Facebook message that he had been involved in a shooting.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so, yeah, that's why we maintain that 800 number. Don't shoot us Facebook messages. Don't send us a tweet, or whatever they're called, X's now, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's important, just like you took the direct call. We were talking about the other, earlier. And I tell people, when we handed our business cards, it has our cell phone number on there. So people have our numbers. And you can get on the Tmpa website. I'm sure our phone numbers are probably on there too. But don't call us direct at 2 a.m. because I may not answer.
Right.
So make sure if you're in a critical incident, call the 800 number because it is always answered.
Yeah.
And somebody's going to respond to that.
Yep.
But I also think something else when you talk about too, besides critical incidents, is you're going through this horrible incident, right? But what about the aftermath of that? Mm-hmm. I mean, because I think that's part of really where, maybe it's a good one. Maybe you don't have any issues with it. I've been to, I wouldn't even fathom to guess 100 probably, critical incident shootings, and every officer is going to be different on how they respond to that.
Yeah.
I've had guys that are, been in multiple critical incidents, like the guy that called us at the farm a couple of weeks ago, or a 30-year sergeant at a department who was so upset that he literally stopped a terrorist. Who had just murdered somebody, but he was beside himself. So the mental aspect of that's very very different with each officer also. And for those that aren't familiar with it, there's a great class at Lemet called PCIS, Post Critical Incident Seminar. There's one coming up in October. If you've just cumulative effect of our career, or if you're in a critical incident, anybody that's been in one of those, look at that class. It's really good.
Yeah, and there's also some resources. Joey Sepulveda and David Kurlovich just taught a class down in, I believe it was Brownsville, about their shooting. And the unique aspect of this is that all the field reps, every single one of us, and I'm not a field rep anymore, but I mean, I'm still kind of associated with you guys.
No, I think you're still a field rep.
Yeah, exactly. So every one of us have been cops, and back to the aftermath of a shooting it's the mental aspect of it, right? The mental well-being of our members. We can offer resources, and so they did a presentation about they were shot in the line of duty, and thankfully they survived. Now they serve. They continue to serve. Our members here in Texas, and they talked about the emotional and mental aspect of it. After not involved, they were involved in the shooting, but also shot, and then talked about the mental health recovery side of it. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's something that, there's this perception in the public. We're going out and I was watching an episode of SWAT on Netflix a couple of weeks ago. And they shoot somebody and they're back at work. It's like no big deal.
Having a beer at the bar that afternoon.
Yeah, that's just not
in uniform.
Yeah. It's just not how it is. I mean, no officer goes to work that day wanting to be involved in a critical incident. No officer goes to work that day wanting to have to use deadly force on somebody.
No.
I mean, you don't want that, but you're prepared to do that if need be, and that's where we become involved with it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of not returning to work for a while, some agencies, or the reality is with the lower recruitment and retention crisis that we have going on right now across America, is that may not have been the policy before, but unfortunately we are seeing some agencies that, because of crisis and coverage, they have to return to work. And one of those that I can think of right now is Loving County, right? One of the richest counties in America, with a population of 75 in the county that reside there. Now, I'm not sure what the average day population is, because there's so many oil service companies in there. But anyway, like they couldn't, you couldn't take off work the next day. I think they work 3 weeks on, 1 week off.
Wow.
Well, and sometimes it's an administrator that doesn't quite grasp the complexity of the situation. Christmas Day, and probably 7 or 8 years ago, another personal call. He had my cell phone number. He calls me. He says, "Hey, man, I just got involved in a shooting." And I followed up with him afterwards. And sadly, that department handled that shooting so badly that he's no longer in law enforcement.
Wow.
He's on scene, and he's starting to, like, it's now hitting him, right? Oh my God, I just had to shoot somebody. And the sheriff pulls up and he's like, "Hey, what's wrong?" And he's like, "Oh man, I'm not feeling real well." And he's like, "Well, suck it up, man."
But I think that was the attitude, back when we started, 30 years ago, was, suck it up, you're fine. Well, look at this increase in police suicides, right? I've had, I tell this every time I teach a class or in front of somebody, I've had 4 really good friends, and I just don't mean like, I know you from a class, but like come out to my house and eat, cook steaks, that top friends kill themselves since 2005. That's too many.
Yeah.
It's too many.
Yeah. And it takes organizations like Tmpa, Copline, which Copline's a great organization that we are very, very, very supportive of. One of our directors here, John Sariga, is on the board of directors. And so again, it's a great point. So if you are having these thoughts, it's okay to be okay, and reach out to a field rep, reach out to 1-800 number. A lot of the field reps we have on staff are also crisis certified as counselors through Copline. And so, man, there's just so many different resources that we can offer outside of legal, right?
Well, and that's what JW was saying. These, I think administrators are getting better about understanding the mental aspect of it, because there has been a huge push in, law enforcement mental health in the last several years, but that's still a relatively new concept, and a lot of agencies aren't where we should be with that. And hopefully it's getting better, but there's still some old school people out there where suck it up and go on, but but you do need to take care of your mental health.
Well, if anybody listening or watching or viewing this episode wants some information about what we can do to educate you, your department, your agency, reach out to us at 1-800-848-2088, and we can get in contact with our training coordinator, Jay McClellan, and see what we can do for post-critical incidents. If you can't make it to the Lehman class, maybe TMPA can coordinate with your agency and we can put those on. So,
Yep.
but the main thing is let's limit it down to one point of contact. If that doesn't happen, we understand it happens. I mean, that just, it's
chaotic
chaos.
scene. We get it.
Yeah, it's chaos. But for the most part, just keep in mind the body cams. I cannot stress that enough. The other cameras that are going on, look, we're cops, right? So the first thing that we're going to do when we run up on scene is, hey, what happened?
Yep.
And it's not because we're being malicious about it. It's just because we care.
And let me say something on that. So I went to a shooting on September 11th, a couple of years ago, just north of my house, literally about 10 minutes from my house. So one officer called in. When I get there, the second officer was actually on the phone calling TMPA, and I walked up and I'm like, "We're here, brother. You can relax. We're here."
Fastest response.
Yeah, it was. It was pretty quick. And but he still had his body cam on. So he was so upset. Obviously, he just, was involved in a shooting. And I'm like, "Are you still recording?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Well, this incident's over. You're already, you're by your car. It's not a hot incident anymore. Let's find your supervisor and get that body cam turned off."
Yeah.
And last I heard, every department needs to have a good body cam policy.
They do.
And
yes.
I heard, if it's still true, Colleen, isn't that the one where if you're in a critical incident, Colleen, the sergeant walks up and just takes your body cam off?
Yeah, so a lot of departments are taking those policies. Your good departments, what they're doing is they're developing a policy to where the first supervisor that gets on scene after a critical incident, the supervisor identifies who was involved in a situation, and they seclude that officer, give them their buddy officer. But the buddy officers are trained. They give good training of, hey, if you're assigned as a buddy officer, you don't ask them questions about the event. You just make sure that they're okay, physically and emotionally, right? That's what you're there for. And what happens is that supervisor will come up and he'll take possession of that body cam because it's evidence. And he'll take that body cam and he'll collect that body cam as evidence, seclude you off with your partner officer. And that's a really good policy to have. And you probably, if your department doesn't have a similar policy, probably need to look at getting one implemented.
Well, and it goes back to, let's just say hypothetically that we were involved in a shooting right now, right? Let's just say Tony was the shooter and you and I were the first ones on scene. And I was a supervisor and I walked up to him, and all you're going to see, because most of these guys wear them on their chest, right? I segue real quick. I did wear one on my belt. And so every time that because I was a motor cop. And so he would catch people right there. But when they would stand up, my sergeant nicknamed it the crotch cam, right? So typically everybody wears them on their chest.
Only in East Texas.
Only in East Texas. So, but back to my point is that if you just walk up and you see, oh my God, that oh shit moment where their head kind of tilts to the sideways like a Cocker Spaniel, and then they reach in and you see the finger coming at the camera and they turn it off, what's the perception of that, right?
Right.
Is that they're trying to hide something.
Yep.
So the supervisors out there that are listening, it's real simple. Clear it with your administration. If you don't have a good policy in place, just say the time is X, the date's name the date, and just say there's no evidentiary value to record anything at this point forward. I'm now going to secure Officer Rike and place him in my car, and then turn it off. That way there's no question to maybe a grand jury, maybe the DA's office that don't have a good relationship with the police department, and so there's no question.
Or a better statement that I would probably recommend that they make is that as a supervisor, I'm collecting this body camera because it contains evidence of what occurred.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And now you're preserving that evidence so that way the truth will come out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a good thing to kind of segue. Speaking of, we've had some legislative changes, pertaining to body cams. We just discussed that earlier. Is there any legislative things on the horizon pertaining to body cams or pertaining to anything that we discussed today?
I haven't heard anything on body cams. I can tell you that every legislative session there's groups out there that, believe that, there's not enough accountability for law enforcement. So they're always filing bills. Right. And a lot of those, when you look at the bills, you understand where they're coming from. But they're viewing it from one lens and one lens only. And they don't understand, the implications that come out of the legislation. So, but to answer your question, we haven't been made aware of anything, but we're always prepared for it. We know it's going to hit.
I got asked the other day why our legislative team doesn't, it was a member that texted me and she said, hey, can I get kind of a game plan of like what we're going to fight against at the Capitol this year? And I was like, well, no. And I think it's a good time to go ahead and just let's just air this out now. The reason why we can't is because number one, it's so fluid. It changes so drastically. Yep. And I think that the average 21, 22-year-old member at Tmpa can't really wrap their head around, not that they're not smart enough, but the complexities of the Capitol are so complex that it's not even worth putting it on paper because the next day it could change. And I don't mean like we have our set agenda of like certain bills that we're trying to back, but by us disseminating that to our membership, we don't want that to get into the wrong hands.
Yeah, so there's a couple,
show our cards.
Couple different aspects on that, right? So, I got to saying, while other people are playing checkers, you have to play chess. Mm-hmm. And so if you've already identified some bad language, right? And I'll give you a great example. One of our past presidents came to me not too long ago about some bad legislation that he's anticipating coming. And so we're already working on a game plan. So now if we let those people know that their bill is on our radar, then they're going to take steps to try to circumvent and overcome what we're trying to do, right? Yep. And then on another aspect of it, God, there were so many bills filed last session. I mean, thousands and thousands of bills were filed, right? And when you look at the joint resolutions and everything else, I mean, we're talking like 12,000 bills that were filed. Yeah. And so what we do is we go through and we look at all, we read the caption on all of them. And if it looks like it's anything that could affect the laws that we enforce or the rights that we have, or anything that affects law enforcement, we mark that bill. Because if that bill gets a hearing, now what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to completely thoroughly vet that bill, read that bill. How's it going to impact department policy? How is it going to impact the individual officer working on the street?
And that's where our members and field reps come in. Tony's been down to the Capitol. I've been down to the Capitol. We've reached out to different members. So if you guys want to be involved in a process, I tell you what, I don't even know if you have a list, like a call upon list. But man, I think it would be cool is that if you have an interest, a vested interest, and you want to become involved with what's going on at the Capitol, and you want to be almost like a witness list for our Ledge team,
right?
I think that would be great to go ahead and start compiling that now. So if you have an interest in doing that, reach out to us. Reach out to bluegrid@tmpa.org, and we'll forward that over to our Ledge team to say, hey, I work in Montgomery County, and if you guys need something that I can testify on for whatever bill, man, don't hesitate to call that. It'll give you guys unlimited resources from
we did that. We did that not last year, but the year before during our annual conference. On the workers' comp bill and then on various others. So I collected a list then, and we do need to update it because the turnover in law enforcement, stuff like that. But that's a great point. But then also for the association leadership out there, for our local leadership, one of the programs that we're looking at bringing back into the legislation was we used to have what we called Ledge Days, and we'd have
coming back
18 or 20 of our members that come in, and we'll put them in and we'll bus them around and get them down to the Capitol, that kind of stuff. Well, what we found out is it's so hectic and so busy down there during session. We have to be more strategic on how we do that. So the approach that we're looking at right now is let's get our local association leadership and let's strategize, have the commitments in place of the only thing they have to do is get here. And if it's going to be an overnight, they'll have to cover their overnight trip, but we're going to make sure they're well fed. Maybe that afternoon, take them out and reward them for their dedication.
Yes.
But what we're looking at potentially is if we have and this is a great example. Let's say we have a bill that we're trying to push through, and it's not being called up for a hearing in that committee. Well, we may have a strong local association that's in that committee chair's area, and it'd be nice to say, hey, now it's time to rally the troops, get your folks down here, because when I walk in his office, we have a great relationship with so many folks down there, but they still view us as law enforcement's lobby.
And they're outside, and y'all are outside. You don't live inside his district.
Right. But yet, if I can walk in there with their local association president and 4 or 5 of their members, and all of them are saying, "Hey, this is serious. You need to take aim at this." That moves mountains. So we're looking at a more strategic approach.
Well, I also think it's important because these, let's face it, state reps and anybody in Austin, they're not police officers.
No.
So
except for a couple.
Except for a couple. But it's important that they have that local association or those local law enforcement groups come tell them, this is an issue for us.
Yeah.
So I think every state rep wants to hear from their local constituents.
100%.
And I'll prove the point that they do. If you look at what happened this last election cycle, a lot of our friends lost their seat because they voted how their people wanted them to vote. The people in their district said, we don't want you to support this, or we want you to support that. And they carried out the will of their people, and that made them political targets of some other folks. And so a lot of them lost their seat because they were voting for their constituents' wishes.
And I also think it's important bringing up, kind of bouncing around a little bit, but when you have those local associations, it's important that each local, and if you don't have a local association, get with us and we'll help you start one. But all this political capital starts with that local association at that local level. And then that local political capital that you build up can actually bleed over into political capital in Austin.
Yep. Well, and I'll segue or kind of, I guess, jump on the heels or backs of kind of what you're talking about, is that we're all cops, right? So we all get the third cousin that calls us and says, hey, Tyler, my boyfriend's been arrested for some Class C charges. Or, hey, Tyler, I've got the situation with my neighbor, and they all call for, I don't want to call it legal advice, but they want our law enforcement perspective.
Yep.
And everybody listening to this podcast that's ever worn a badge, you cringe every time those phone calls happen, because you don't hear from sons of bitches on your birthday. You don't hear from them on Christmas. But by God, if little Jimmy gets picked up for a Class C warrant, you're the first one they pick up the phone to.
Hey, let me run something past you.
Yeah. So keep that in mind when you, the local association, needs something from your city council, is that the only time you need something, you attend the city council. It doesn't start right then. It starts, you need to be there every single time to let them know that you support them and you support what they stand for, because when you do need to rally the troops, you've already got that vested interest. And the same goes back to the Capitol here. So keep those relationships open and keep them alive.
Yeah, 1,000% agree. And that's why I tell all my locals is like, and here's the other part to that too. I can tell them what to do and I can give them advice, but ultimately it's not going to be me sitting at that city council meeting.
Right.
It needs to be somebody from that association out there, there and just listening, because you do learn a lot just by listening.
And this is also a good point I want to bring up. Other statewide associations, I guess you have to get permission to endorse, speak to state reps to make sure that it aligns with their views. We don't.
No.
You guys, I'll put it to you like this. I'm not going to call Progressive and allow Progressive to tell me what I can wash my windows with. Progressive Insurance isn't going to call and say, hey, you're only allowed to drive a Chevrolet or a Ford and park it by your house, right? Because you guys are the customers. That's case in point, right? We're not going to call local and say, you can't do this for this following reasons. So
yeah, and I want to really drive in the importance with an example.
Yeah.
I'm going to drive my Crown Vic to drive
Yes.
this in. Yeah. So yeah, I really want to drive in what Tony was just talking about and give a great example. We encourage our locals, be at every city council meeting. Mm-hmm. Every council meeting, the mayor and the council members, they should be able to look out in that crowd and they should see a local association member sitting there in their local association shirt. And here's a great reason why. Before I came to government affairs, being a field rep, one of the things that we do is we help negotiate police contracts. And one of my locals, they were in the middle of negotiations and they don't go to any of their council meetings. And what I found out was that the city was saying, you know what, we really don't have the money to give pay raises. 2 council meetings before that, the city says, hey guys, we have so much money that we're actually going to lower the property tax rate. And they didn't have anybody inside that meeting to come back and report to me, the guy that's your lead negotiator, hey, this is what was said, or their local officers to be able to have those conversations with their council members.
Yeah. Again, it makes sense for everybody to be there. Yep. So anyway, well, you guys, is there anything else we didn't cover that you guys wanted to cover?
I got nothing.
Well, I don't think last time we were on that we covered your favorite drink of choice, cop movie, or cop car.
Oh yeah, we did.
We did?
Yeah, but I've already forgotten what it was.
Okay, so I know J-Dub's gone several times, so we're gonna exit out with the following. So, what's your favorite cop movie or line from a cop movie? Your favorite cop car and your favorite drink of choice when Tony's relaxing?
Well, so I did when I started in law enforcement. They were driving those Dodge Aries K cars. If you remember those, that's probably.
I don't remember them, but I've
I don't
seen pictures
either
of them in black and white.
But I mean, you cannot beat a Ford Crown Victoria.
No. It's a workhorse.
You can't. You just can't. You can't beat them. So Crown Vic, obviously. And I would say the official drink of the Tmpa field rep would be the old fashioned.
Yep.
And if you're ever in Mineral Wells, Texas,
With Angel's Envy.
I like it with makers. But if you're ever in Mineral Wells, Texas, there's a little corner called Coffee and Cocktails. I'll go to give them a shout out. They have a Baker Old Fashioned. It is worth the drive to Mineral Wells just to get that Old Fashioned. And my favorite line from a cop movie, I mean, you got to go Dirty Harry, right? Yeah. I mean, that's probably the most iconic.
There's
one
no
out
argument there.
Yeah.
There's no. I like the Peacock one from the other guys.
That's a good one too.
That's not shocking.
Yeah, that's not shocking at all.
Well, hey, I can't thank y'all enough for you making the trip down. This is just around the corner from me and J-Dub, but man, it's always good to have you on. I always have a good time with you off the clock and on the clock, and man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you do for the members.
Well, and I do want to give you a shout out also, because this podcast is, you started it a while back, and it just continues to grow.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
I have people tell me all the time, man, I listen to your podcast. Those guys do a great job. And I give all the credit to you guys because y'all do a fantastic job with us.
We appreciate it, man.
I never listened to podcasts until you started this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we started it. It's our podcast. And, man, I think it's a great platform for us to get on here and do exactly what we did today, right? And so
have a conversation. It's educational.
Yeah, 100%. So, and if you guys are interested in being a guest on Blue Grit Podcast, reach out to us at bluegrit@tmpa.org. We'd love to have you on. Again, this is told somebody this yesterday. This is y'all's association, right? This is we work for you guys, and man, it's a great organization to be a part of, but it's also a damn good place to work. And so it's an honor to be here. It's an honor to do what we get to do every single day. You kind of got a glimpse of the different facets and different hats that we all wear. Tony being a field rep, JW being legislative affairs, and then my communications aspect of job. So anyway, it's a good day.
But we still do it all, though.
We do it all. Yeah, we all kind of, again, we all have different hats in our trucks, and whatever day calls for that hat to be put on, then we put them on. So,
Yep, I agree.
Anyway, you guys take care. Stay safe. God bless you. And as always, may God bless Texas. We're out.